The journey started really for me as May 14th, 1988, standing on the front porch of my childhood home. And a drunk driver hit them head on in front of my childhood home there. The neighbors started to come out and, we started to see flames and things like that. And the word was getting around pretty quick that it was a school bus that had been involved in the accident. And so we were hearing these kids start to scream and, a scream that one of those that you just never forget. And in the middle of all of that happening and me feeling this odd, weird calm and peace that had come over me, with all of my heart, with everything inside of me, I truly believe God spoke to me that day and he said, "You're going to spend the rest of your life rescuing kids off of that bus."
Hello, Kingdom Effect listeners. Man, do we have an episode today full of tough topics. Tragedy, calling, conflict, purpose. Daniel Breeden with Tennessee Right to Life and the childhood tragedy that gave him the passion to wake up every morning ready to tackle some of the most difficult issues in our culture today. Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Kingdom Effect podcast. This is Kevin Beasley here, as always, with my good buddy, Glenn Buckshot Buckley. What's up? What's up, Buckley?
Man, just hanging out at the office today. It's cold. That's about all that's going on now.
It is cold. I bet your outside activities have kind of minimized lately, huh?
No, actually, mine increase when it gets cold.
Because you get around that fire, stoke that fire.
Yeah. I can't. If it's too hot to sit around a fire, I can't go camping.
Yeah. Hey, what about, didn't you, and I missed it. I felt really bad because I really wanted to come, and then I opened up my Facebook one day, and it was pictures of you doing your bros giving. I was like, dude, I missed it. I missed the bros giving. How'd that go?
Yeah, it was really good. We did a chili cook-off this year, and I won the chili cook-off.
Of course. Were you also the judge? Were you the host or the judge?
I was just the host, but it's always fun, man. Just a bunch of dudes hanging out. We play cards. There's pianos and guitars in the event space, so musicians start playing. And I don't know if you saw the video of Marty singing, but that's a bros giving tradition, is Marty singing Tennessee whiskey. And my grandson was there this year, my 19-month-old grandson.
Wow, that's so cool. I was, I do a lot of work on Substack, and I have been posting a lot lately because the Lord's been just talking to me about proximity. Like it's virtually impossible. I mean, we're in proximity to each other today on Zoom, so there's different versions of proximity, but it's virtually impossible to do effective disciple making if you're not spending a lot of time with people. Let's figure out a way. And also did an article recently on loneliness in men, the epidemic of male loneliness in America. So let's find opportunities to get together face to face and just like be in proximity with one another. That's where the real stuff happens.
Yeah. Hey, on that note, and I know it's kind of off topic for today, but since you brought it up, how do introverted people deal with discipleship?
That's a great question. I think it's discipline. I mean, I'm just talking off the cuff here, but what popped in my mind is just like a recognition that in order to do this well, I need other people. And I wouldn't say it's much different from like a hyper extroverted person who has to say, in order for good discipleship, I have to quit talking. I have to let other people talk, and I have to not be the center of attention. But yeah, that's a really good question. It's hard. My wife is an introvert. She loves being at home, and she loves being snuggled up with a book, or some episodes on Netflix or whatever. But I think recognition that the most valuable thing we can do as disciple making is be in the presence of other believers. Like, I think about that, I always push back to how did Jesus do it? That's the model. I always look back to Jesus's model. We can't really do it. I guess we could, but it's harder for us to do it like Jesus did it, because he said, follow me. He said, leave your stuff behind and let's just walk together. Let's spend 24/7 together. And I think, but he was launching the most transformational work in ministry in the history of creation, proclaiming that the kingdom of God was coming to planet Earth, and that was the most important work that ever has been done. And so it was like, I've got to have the right people by my side. So I'm going to see who's willing to leave everything and spend 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year with me. And obviously that's not practical in our culture, but I think what you did, I mean, you've done that for how many years, where you intentionally made a decision that I'm going to prioritize this night together with my friends. How many years?
Yeah, I think we're like I think this was year 4, I
Yeah.
think.
What,
Mhm.
why did you initiate that?
Well, honestly, it all kind of started as a event that I wanted to throw for my clients. The first year didn't get a whole lot of response from my clients, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to change it from a Thanksgiving appreciation dinner for clients to Bros Giving, because I'd already rented the space,
Mm.
and then it just kind of evolved from there, really.
What's been the positive results from doing that 4 years in a row?
I think mainly is meeting new people. You know, I throw out an invite on Facebook and whatever, but it's open to the public essentially. Like, for instance, if I invited you, Kevin, you're free to invite 20 of your friends.
Right.
And so it just really, you never know who's going to be there. You get to meet a lot of new folks and, create some new relationships
Mm.
within that community. So I think that's the biggest benefit, probably,
Yeah.
from a spiritual standpoint.
Yeah. We probably talked about this book before, but I think in the 90s, a guy, I think his name was Brandenburg or Bradenburg or something, that wrote a book called The Great Good Place.
Mm.
And he paints this picture that the reason America is crumbling from the inside out is because we don't generally, this is changing a little bit, but the last 50 years, we haven't generally had a good place where people can talk about things that matter. So we spend our time in 3 places, generally: home, we're inside 4 walls with our garage door down and privacy fences around our house, and we're only engaging with people who think exactly like us. And then we go to work, where we get a chance to interact with people different from us, but like it's kind of against the rules to talk about things that matter, like church and
Mm.
politics and things like that. And then the other place we spend our time is at church. And that is obviously with people who think like us. So his theory is that one of the things that we're missing as a culture is opportunity to have significant conversation with people who think differently from us. In the old days, that was the local mom and pop hardware store, where they had rockers on the front porch, and the guys would just sit in the rockers and talk about things that mattered. So
I was going to say, I think a lot of people fear that now. Fear out of, I'm going to say something that's going to offend somebody and I'm going to get sued, or a
mhm.
fight's going to break out, or, whatever. It's Charlie Kirk is a good example. He loved to have those conversations where you debate your
Mhm.
ideas and thoughts and beliefs, and then it just incites so much anger in people. So I think a lot of people are maybe would like to do that, but are afraid to do that.
That's so good, Buckley. So good. And I think it's a challenge to all of us who say yes to Jesus and being missional and actually taking the gospel outside the 4 walls of the churches. It's a challenge to create space to have those conversations, which is really amazing. Like, we didn't plan this intro to go this way, but it is super relevant to our guest today and what he does, which is taking a very controversial topic and issue into the public setting and trying to have healthy conversations. So good job, bro, even though it's an accident. But yeah,
Everything's an accident with us.
yeah, that's right. But yeah, I think I would say, like, just based on the last 10 minutes, is like, let's commit together to create space to have healthy conversations with people who think differently from us. So yeah, Daniel Breeden is our guest for today, and I'm so excited. I've known Daniel for a few years. I'm so excited for him to, more than anything, tell the story of how he became passionate about what he does. But what he does is he's executive director of Tennessee Right to Life, which, again, as I said, controversial topic: what happens with children in the womb. And he works really across those contexts that we just mentioned. He does a lot of work with the church, but he also does a lot of work in the political settings. Daniel, welcome. How did we meet, brother?
Thank you so much. It's great to be on here today, and thank you for the years of speaking into my life and being a kind of mentor for me as well since I moved to the state of Tennessee. I think I met you about 3 or 4 months after I moved to Tennessee and was the executive director for Operation Saving Life at that time. So I think we met there and we're connected through Groove Life and some other things that we had going on at the same time, and it's been an amazing relationship, man.
So just to give you guys context, a bunch of episodes ago, you got to think back a bunch of episodes. We had a couple of episodes actually with Scott Hord. Scott was the guy that would stand and still does. I saw a Facebook post and I interacted with him a little bit even this morning. He's in Illinois right now. I always hesitate to say this because when you talk about it, it sounds like he's the guy that's screaming at people and telling them they're going to hell, but that's not Scott at all. Scott is a very generous, kind, heartfelt person who is just passionate about talking to young women who have been lied to about what they're doing and presenting the truth and letting them then come to a conclusion about what they're going to do with the baby in their womb. Operation Saving Life was kind of the support mechanism. When Scott would rescue people from the parking lot, Operation Saving Life would step in and provide them with coaching and mentoring, supplies, rent, cars, anything they needed to make this pregnancy go as smoothly as possible, and then provide support, I think, for up to 2 years after the baby was born. The longer term support mechanism for the front lines work that Scott was doing. But then after that, you moved to Tennessee Right to Life. What does that mean for you when you think about, I have a voice for a movement in an entire state to save children's lives? What does that mean?
Yeah, it means a lot, and to me, it always goes back to my belief, my belief in God, my belief in Jesus, is that I've been called for a specific purpose. God has called me into this for such a time as this. And although I may not have all the answers to all the questions, I may not be able to give you every statistic. I know that God has called me and He has brought me into this position as executive director for this main purpose of bringing the church back together with the pro-life movement in general in the state of Tennessee.
One of the things we really talk about is ordinary people doing extraordinary work in the kingdom of God. But when you really have someone this passionate about what you do, it usually points back to some events in your younger years, right? So talk to us a little bit about what happened in you, to you, through you, that kind of birthed this kind of passion in your life.
The journey started really for me as May 14th, 1988. Standing on the front porch of my childhood home. We had heard an explosion outside and rushed out onto the front porch. And, 7 years old, watched my dad run across Mill Creek Road there that was right below I-71. And he ran up, jumped over the guardrail onto I-71, and the first explosion happened. The neighbors started to come out and, we started to see flames and things like that. And the word was getting around pretty quick that it was a school bus that had been involved in the accident. And remember all of these things as I'm standing there. My sister is crying and in tears. My mom is a mess. And I remember standing there and feeling peace in the situation. And there was another explosion that happened, and we began to hear the kids screaming on the bus. This was the Carroll County bus crash that happened on May 14th, 1988. And there was a school bus load of kids that were coming back from a Kings Island trip, and a drunk driver hit them head on in front of my childhood home there. So we are hearing these kids start to scream, and a scream that one of those that you just never forget. And in the middle of all of that happening and me feeling this odd, weird calm and peace that had come over me, with all of my heart, with everything inside of me, I truly believe God spoke to me that day and He said, "You're going to spend the rest of your life rescuing kids off of that bus." I'm 7 years old, have no idea what that truly means at the time, but all I knew is that this God that my dad and mom had been talking about, this God that my dad preached about, He's an evangelist in Kentucky, and I knew what that was that had spoke to me that day. And I knew from that day, I'm committing my life to whatever this means. So I grew up listening to my dad preach this sermon about this bus crash incident, and I seen people coming to the saving knowledge of Christ by the droves as he would preach this message with such passion, because he was one of the first responders there. I heard the message and I listened to it, and I kept kind of hearing that same voice as we were in these services, is this is what I've called you to do. You're going to spend the rest of your life doing this. So at the age of 16 is when I got my first kind of youth pastor role, was at the age of 16, which is bizarre. Started helping out and kind of leading the youth group in my dad's church. That transferred over into a commitment that this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to rescue kids. I'm supposed to rescue families. This is what God's called me to do. So I became a youth pastor, college age pastor, was an inner city pastor, and kind of time goes on, and I'm still remembering back my dad preaching these sermons about this school bus crash incident, and kind of carrying that forward and telling this story in very small groups, the same story that I'm telling today. Life kind of goes on. I start working for an organization called the Kentucky United Methodist Children's Home, where we had mentally, physically abused kids, and also had some kids there that had been sex trafficked as well. And so I'm about in year, I'm going to say 7 or 8 of working there, and I was burnt out. I had been through so many different incidents at the home, and just seeing the kids that would come through and your heart would break for them. And some of the kids that couldn't even talk to you because of what they had been through. And they would just want to go over in the corner and stand and cry because they were so scared to be around any humans at all. My son makes the 8th grade basketball team there in Nicholasville, Kentucky. And I'm done. I said, God, I don't want anything to do with this anymore. You're going to have to find me something else to do. I know you called me to do this, but you called the wrong guy, because I can't do it anymore. I'm burnt out. It's destroying me. It's getting the best of my family. And so I go to my son's first basketball practice, and I'm sitting in the gym, and I look over, and about the same time a gentleman walks in on this side of the gym on my left, my dad walks in and sits down beside me on my right. And when the gentleman walked in on my left and I just glanced at him, I immediately knew that there was some kind of connection there by his appearance. I knew that there was something there, and God reminded me of that bus crash. And he said, I told you that I've called you to continue doing this. Your mission is to rescue kids from that bus. So I asked my dad, who's sitting beside me, I said, hey, Dad, do you happen to know this guy? And my dad leans forward. He said, I don't think so. And so he looks again and he said, he said, he may have been on the bus crash that day. Again, we're going from Carroll County, Kentucky to Nicholasville, Kentucky. We're talking years and years and years down the road. And this guy walks into the gym. And so I jump up and I run down to this guy and I stick my hand out. I said, hey, I just want to introduce myself. And he turns around and looks at me, and I said, my name is Daniel Breeden. I said, what's your name? And when I said my last name, he could have stared a hole through me. He said, what did you say your last name was? And I said, Breeden. And he said, you would have to be kidding me. There's nothing in this world that would make me believe your dad's name is Daryl. And I said, yes, sir, it is. I said, and he's actually sitting right over here on the bench. We're both fighting back tears by this time. And he said, I was on that bus. And he said, and actually my sister was on that bus as well. And he said, and your dad was very involved in making sure that my sister made it off the bus that day. So he tells me a little bit of his story, and we exchange, and then we talk about what we're going to do next. And I leave the gym that day thinking, like, God, wow, like what a moment. Like, I'm done. I'm ready to throw in the towel. I'm giving up. This is all, it's too much. It's overwhelming. And then God brings this person back into my life. And several conversations, just more or less years of conversation happened after that, where my dad, myself, and Harold Dennis is the gentleman's name, are talking. We're meeting in Harold's house. I get to know Harold's son, who made the 8th grade basketball team. Like, how awesome is God? Our kids become friends, and to this very day, as of today, when this is being recorded, my best friend in this entire world is a guy named Harold Dennis. And it keeps me motivated, keeps me encouraged. And every time I talk about this or I think about Harold Dennis, that comes back to me as, hey, this is why I had you everywhere, every step along the way. This is why I had you at the Methodist home. This is why you moved to Tennessee to get into the pro-life movement. This is why you were at Operation Saving Life. This is why you're now at Tennessee Right to Life.
I tell you what's crazy, Daniel, is as you're telling your story, I'm thinking of questions to ask you. And as you keep going, you answer those questions. And I tell you what's cool about that. It kind of gives me this kindred spirit connection with you. Like we've had a lot of the same experiences, experiencing the trauma of children to burnout, to miraculous encounters, these God encounters with other people. I guess one that you didn't answer during the burnout phase when you kind of took the break. How long was that time period before you said, "Okay, God, I get it. You're not done."
Yeah, that was, to be honest with you, brother, that was probably a 6 month period in my life where it was just a fight. It was, it was where every day when I got up, I was excited, I was happy, I was ready, I was running to the truck to go to work. It wasn't work, it was serving. I never called it that I would go to work. I've said that all my life. I want to be serving every day when I go, and I would preach that to people. Even at the Methodist home, that's what I would say is, we're here to serve. We're not here to work. And it just got to a point where it became work. I was getting up every day. Felt like I was punching a clock. I was going through the motions. And to be very specific about what happened is that it was me getting away from fasting and praying. I can blame it on a lot of things. I can say it was burnout. I can say it was overwhelming, and that makes it a lot of times people feel bad for you in those, and it is. It's very overwhelming. It's a very trying and hard experience. But when we get away from those things that we know are the things that help us survive, to be able to do this tough work, that's when it's God is calling us out, and God will move us on to the next thing. He's got somebody in the works that's going to take over and take it to a new level.
Personally, when I would go through these burnout phases, a lot of times it was spawned by failures. I didn't save this kid, or I didn't save this lady that was being trafficked, and I dropped the ball, or there were all these other things in life that were getting in the way of accomplishing whatever that was. I look back and I look at how many times I neglected my children to go save these children. And for a long time, I struggled with, was that the right thing to neglect my children and go save these children? And I've told this story before. I can't remember if it was on here, Kevin, or if I just told you. Both of my daughters, my oldest daughters, their careers are careers of service. One's a nurse. One was EMS, EMT. When I got to feeling down about that, or having regret for that, I look back and go, I at least mirrored a life of service that in some way imparted to my children. You have any similar experiences?
I think mine is being even revealed to this day. When you look back of all those times when you wanted to quit and when you wanted to move on to something else. And I've got a construction background as well, so I just got God just send me back to building homes, or I was giving God all kinds of suggestions, which He wasn't listening to me. But all the things that we try to come up with as humans to say, this is what I need to do. And God just kept reminding me over and over and over again. And when I would feel that way of, hey, I feel like I'm spending more time ministering to or caring for these children when my children at home are not getting the best of me. That's what would eat me alive. It wasn't that I didn't spend time at home. It wasn't that I was out for, military or things like that, that so many have to do. I was home every night, but I wasn't home. It wasn't me.
Yeah.
But man, when I was at the Methodist home, I was 110% me. But when I was home, I was 40% me. God is faithful, and when you see that, even in those moments when I was 20% or I was 30%, now I see my two adult sons that they are asking me and so and wanting to know about fasting and prayer. They're wanting to know about how do we get into this pro-life movement? What do we do? How do we do more? How can we serve more? So although I went through those times and I would beat myself up over them when I was in those moments, I think it was, God saying, stay the course, keep doing what I've called you to do. And I'm seeing a lot of those the rewards are happening even to this day.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a balance to this because, you can't always take your kids with you to do things, particularly the kind of work you were in, Buckley. But, the Shema, which is the basically primary passage of scripture that the Jews have built their culture on. In the section of that, it says, teach these things to your children. Teach them as you're lying down and as you're rising, as you're walking down the road. Like there's are ways that we can actually, and you've talked about this before, Buckley, a lot about how do I include my children, even if it's in the thought process, even if it's with sharing with them why I'm doing what I'm doing, or as much appropriate details as I can give them. I think, and it's not just with children, it's with our entire Christian life. We put it in a box and we close the box as opposed to inviting people into the story that we're living. So the American church culture, and we talk a lot about that, hopefully not in a critical way, but in a loving way. The American church culture has created a system that it's easy to do that. I wake up on Sunday morning and I know that I kind of open up my spirituality box from 10 to 12. And then at 1 o'clock, I have lunch with my family. We might talk about the sermon, and then I close the box back until next Sunday at 10 o'clock, where I open it back up. I think that there might be some really good wisdom there in parenting, that maybe that's kind of how we are not present with our children. So I go out and do my thing, and then as I'm on my way home, close the box up and enter into this whole nother kind of thing, as opposed to inviting my children into my day, even if it's less amount of time, like a less amount of time clocked, basically. They long to know what their daddy does or what their mommy does. Maybe
Yeah.
there's ways that if we have a little bit less time, we've talked about this before, Buckley, if we have a little bit less time, what do we do with that time to make it as rich and inviting as possible?
Yeah. And you're right. It's so hard to balance. And I'm sure Daniel can speak to this also, but the things that you experience when you're serving, particularly women and children who are being abused or aborted or whatever the case might be, something very traumatic. It's really hard to discern what to share and when to share, not just with your children, but your spouse, your buddies. It's really hard because for me, when I would get home at the end of the day, that's the last thing I wanted to talk about was what I had experienced, in my job. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's learning or discerning what's healthy to share and involve your family in. But unfortunately for me, I didn't learn that until the end, and so for the majority, I just shut them out from it. I kept it separate. Obviously, not the best choice, but it's the choice that I made. But hopefully, through my story and Daniel's story, we can encourage other people to figure that part of their life out if they're serving in this capacity.
I remember when Tammy, you served on the board with a ministry that actually took women to strip clubs at night, late at night, and built relationships with the dancers. When we were interviewing her on her episode, she shared stories of bringing dancers home for things like Thanksgiving meals and just regular meals, and interacting with her children. And I remember thinking oh, it felt a little bit dangerous. It felt a little bit like off limits, to even hear her tell that story. But that's a good example, because you can circle back around at some point and say, if we as our family did not invite these ladies into our home, they're isolated and they're in very dangerous situations. So we as a family, you're participating in this ministry by opening up our home together to these ladies. And maybe the time to say that's 10 years from now. Maybe that's not when the child is 5 or 6 years old. Maybe it's 15 or 16. You point back and say, remember how we opened up our home for these ladies. I remember that being a little bit like creating some tension in me on would I do that? Would I want to expose my children to these people? I mean, I'm being really honest and vulnerable by saying that. But it really meant a lot to me that is one way you could involve your family in what you do. That passion is viral. It catches. Just like when Daniel tells his story, he goes all over the state of Tennessee in different counties recruiting people to volunteer for Tennessee Right to Life. Telling the story is is the viral piece of it. That's what catches. It's not necessarily, I mean, there's some juice in sharing statistics and numbers and things like that. But what really gets people engaged are the stories. And so, what can we appropriately tell our children that exposes them to sharing in ministry with us? I think it's a really good question. As I was listening to you, Daniel, and I'd love for you to share a little bit, I was thinking back on times in my life when I was ready to quit. God is so faithful to drop one little breadcrumb, which is really usually a really large breadcrumb, but drop a breadcrumb for us. It's kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of the Hunger Games movies. And they get these gifts dropped down and it gives them the energy to just go they're ready to be done and quit. And that little gift that dropped from the sky gives them the vision for the next season. So don't you wish, Daniel, that God would just give us those all the time so we could just see it? Why do you think that God withholds from us those moments in order to let us wrestle?
I got to go all the way back even further than the story that I started with in May 14th, 1988. I was just coming out of having bow legs when I was 5, 6, and into 7 years old. My dad could put my ankles together and he could put a soccer ball in between my knees. They told my parents, he'll never be over 5'4". He's going to be in a wheelchair, never play sports. All of these never, can't, won't, all of this stuff. And my dad refused and said, no, we're not going to believe what the doctors are saying. And they actually held a prayer meeting at my house, at my childhood home, same one. And the pastor of the church and my dad would hold my ankles together, and the pastor would put his hands on the outsides of my knees. And when I was standing on the front porch of that home, my knees were together. And no doctor ever operated on me. I'm 6'4" and I dunked a basketball in high school. It's those times of going back and saying, don't tell me God can't. Don't tell me that when I get so depressed and so down and ready to give up, I got to be reminded of those things in the past. I want the breadcrumbs. I want those things to drop on me. I want the manna from heaven to make it so easy that I can gobble it up and just keep going. But I think sometimes God withholds that. So we have to look back and say, look at all of these times throughout your life, starting back when you were 4 or 5 years old and had bow legs and could have ended up in a wheelchair. And look what you're doing now, running all over the state of Tennessee every day with zero physical limitations at all. And I thank God for that every day.
Wow.
I've been watching The House of David, the series. Obviously, there's things in there that aren't in Scripture, but I do remember this one part. It's in the second season. This is after Saul finds out that David was anointed king, and David flees the palace and is hiding out in the mountains. And he goes to where all the priests are, and he asks them if they have any weapons, and they said, we have Goliath's sword. And so he goes and gets the sword, and he looks at the priest and he says, thank you. And the priest is like, for what? And he's like, I needed to remember how great God was.
Mm-hmm.
I thought of that scene as you were saying that, Daniel. Kevin, your question was why do we not experience that constantly? Well, and I think, why do we have to wrestle sometimes? And I think it's because we forget the how great God is. And I don't think it's so much God not providing. I think it's just us forgetting. And then we get that little reminder, such as Daniel at the basketball game. We get that reminder. We just need to remember how great God is, and that He was great the whole time, and He was there the whole time, and that's kind of my take on that.
And actually, I mean, it's all related to our flesh. I've been studying a lot lately about right now as we're talking and we're recording this podcast. In the middle of the day, there's a massive all-out war going on in the heavenlies, like just behind the veil, just behind the curtain. And that's a war for our souls. So even right now, as we're recording this podcast, there's dark and light forces warring for our souls to take ground in my heart and in my mind and in my my mind, will, and emotions. And yeah, how easy it is to forget that when we're going through the daily grind. But like as you were talking, Glenn, I was thinking about, I think that's probably why Jesus gave us communion, and that's what he says, remember what I did for you. And it's hard to think about how communion would have been received and expressed 2,000 years ago in a different culture. But Jesus commanded, every time you eat and drink, remember me. And because we do it, some churches might do it once a month, some churches might do it once a week. Like, that has deprogrammed what he told us to do. He said, every time you eat and drink, remember me. There may be some ceremonial, ritualistic piece that he meant to that, but I think maybe he meant every single time you eat and drink, remember what I've done for you. And it's the most common thing we do. Like, we don't even think about eating and drinking. Like, I've got a cup of coffee right here that I've been drinking through this thing. And I think he's saying that when you do the most mundane, routine activities that you could possibly imagine, that you do almost without thinking about it, use that as an opportunity to remember. And I know the word remember doesn't literally mean this, but I like to say, become a member with me again. Remember yourself to me every time that you eat or drink. It just like, and I think that's why he tells us to do that, Glenn, is because otherwise, when we're stuck on this side of the veil and we can't see this war going on just on the other side of the veil, it requires discipline. It's a spiritual discipline for us to remember that he is the king, the creator, the king of the kingdom, and we're serving not in the United States of America or wherever you find yourself today. I know we have listeners from other countries, but you are not a citizen of the United States of America. You're a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, and the kingdom has a king, and you're a servant to the king. Now you have to figure out how to walk in another country and this is a hot topic right now, as we're refugees. We're refugees as God is reestablishing his kingdom in New Jerusalem. We are foreigners in a foreign land, but our citizenship is with a king as servants of that king. And it operates on a different set of values. So for you, Daniel, when you were having these experiences and when you were watching those kids die, 23 children died, right? Or
27.
people. 27 people died in that accident. 27 lives were lost in this bus accident. And as you were watching it, you were seeing a more clear picture of light and darkness raging against each other. For whatever reason, the Lord allowed you to witness that. And then he took that and utilized it as a call in your life. I mean, goodness gracious, bro. Thinking about what God allows. And sometimes it's like a little peek on the other side of the curtain. Sometimes it's with our marriages. Like I've had a challenging year with my marriage because my wife's going through a lot of grief and we're trying to figure that out. And the pain that I've seen in her and the pain in our relationship, this is like just peeking behind the curtain, that this war that's being raged just outside of visibility and tangibility. Yeah, maybe that's why the Lord said, every time you eat or drink, remember me. That's powerful.
It is powerful.
Not that this off-topic discussion hasn't been great, but just to kind of get back to Tennessee Right to Life, what's your biggest challenge in trying to marry the church with what you do?
I would say you could use one word, Glenn, and that word is fear. I would say that's the number one word. And I think there's a fear of those that are even maybe in the pro-life movement that have been in this movement for years. The leading individuals in this movement have been connected with the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has been one of the leaders in this. So you have that kind of what the difference between the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, and how do we marry this together and go about this pro-life movement in a way that's unifying and God honoring and all of those things. That's kind of a difference just on the one side, is that you almost got what could look like two sides a lot of times. And working through that, the fear of the Protestant church working with the Catholic Church with the Protestant church, and us going about this together in unity, and then bringing those sides together with the political side. There's a lot of fear. Obviously, it's been it's years and years of fear that has been involved in that, with abortion being legalized for 50 years, and then trying to go back to the church after the Dobbs decision happens and overturns Roe v. Wade. That was when we won. So we look at that. A lot of times there's a confusion around that from the church standpoint. A lot of times is that, wait a second, there was a decision that happened that overturned that. And, now, it's either not happening in my state or it's not happening as much as it was. So a lot of confusion and miscommunication that's happening around that. The sides that's within the church, the kind of the sides that we see from denominations and Protestant Catholic and all of those, the goal of bringing those together, unifying the body of Christ together, and bringing that back with the church and the politicians, the legislative, the laws, all of those things, is integrating those things together. The most difficult thing there is to overcome is the fear.
And I totally agree with what you just said. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a 30,000-foot view of that fear. If I were to have you come down to like 1,000 feet, so we'd look at one individual church. Would you agree that there's also fear of, we don't want to take such a strong stance here because that would exclude these folks over here, and we want everybody to come here, so we're just not going to take a real strong stance one way or the other. Would you agree that that's an issue?
It's a very tricky situation. It's a very tricky stance when a church that maybe for say the last 25 years under their current leadership hasn't really taken a stand on that, and you approach them and say, hey, I'm Daniel from Tennessee Right to Life. Just want to encourage you guys to become a part of this. You really do drill down into that 1,000-foot view, maybe even a little lower than that. And I've had this happen to me. Call the pastor on the phone, and the pastor doesn't want to meet you at their church. They want to meet you somewhere else because they don't want their congregation to see them with you. You may go to a church where it's like, man, we talk about this all the time. We talk about the pro-life movement. We talk about abortion, end of life, euthanasia. Like, it's a normal topic. It's not a normal topic in the church in the state of Tennessee. I'm going to go as far out to say that, step out on a limb and say, I really believe, this is Daniel's belief, that that's not normal in the church of Tennessee. And I'm saying Protestant church specifically. Catholic Church has led this movement for a lot of years in the state of Tennessee, but within the Protestant Church, it's not something that's normal. It's more of a abnormal thing to call different denominations and have the same conversation and not get a lot of pushback from the church of either they don't want to meet you there, or now's not the time, or I thought we won. I don't really want to bring this back up again. I don't want to lose, people, or, we're working on some other things right now that I feel has kind of taken precedent over the issues of life. There's a lot of different pieces and parts to this puzzle.
What's insane to me is, because I get the argument that, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and it's kind of like, what's the point in fighting an abortion anymore if it's illegal here? What's insane to me is to think that you can stop fighting, because the second you stop, there's a new Roe v. Wade. So the battle has to continue. Like, you can't just go sit down and not approach this topic anymore just because, of one legal decision, because laws change every day, and so you can't, what's the word I'm looking for? You can't take a break just because, the fight continues regardless of circumstances.
And I think that the recognizing what the real battle is the key to keep going. So like whenever a battle is lost, the enemy just changes his strategy, right? So now it's the pill, right? Now it's the abortion pill. And so we have to respond to the new strategy with a new strategy. So it's like if you slow down and just think that the war has not been won, right? The battle, they're one battle, but this enemy immediately changed the strategy. So now you can basically get an abortion in your mailbox on your front porch, but then really even that's not the battle. The real battle is as we said earlier, is the war for people's hearts. That's the battle. And so no matter what abortion looks like or any version of sin and rebellion against God looks like, all of those forms of rebellion are fighting for our hearts, the status of our heart. But again, if we just are fighting these simple little issues, we're missing the overall strategy of the enemy to take hearts. And so we're really fighting for people to submit to and surrender to the will and ways of the Savior, God. Yeah. That's the real battle. And so, that's actually a question I would have is like, how do you win hearts of people in this battle against end of life?
One of the best examples that I can give of this is a very recent gentleman that has come into my life. His name's Dr. Hardline. And I'm going to get some of the information. I'll get it close here. But Dr. Hardline is a retired OBGYN, delivered hundreds, maybe thousands of babies here in Tennessee. And he's now the abortion pill reversal expert here in the state of Tennessee. I consider Dr. Hardline a great friend, but I know I can say this because I've asked Dr. Hardline for permission to use his story when I have these opportunities. Dr. Hardline would tell you, if he was on this podcast, he would tell you, I delivered babies. That's what I did. But what I didn't do was that I knew right down the hall, right across the street, that there was abortions happening every day. And it was happening by the hundreds of thousands here in the state of Tennessee. And I didn't do anything about that. What I was doing is I was convincing myself that what I'm doing is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I don't have to get in the fight. I just need to keep doing what I'm doing because I'm delivering babies. I'm not responsible for the people who are taking the lives in abortion. And he tells me, I've spent the last 4 or 5 years of my life, Daniel, committing fully to this movement of the pro-life movement because I'm going to give everything that I've got for the remainder of my time here on earth to save as many babies as I can with what the gifts and skills that God has given me. So I think there's an example of what we see a lot from the church pews is that I attend church, I go to church, I sit in the pew, I listen to the message, I participate in some things here and there. I do my due diligence to be the person that God's called me to be, to abide by, standards and principles and all these things. But when it's hardcore issues like this that has a lot of fear attached to them, my greatest fear isn't the abortionist. My greatest fear isn't the pill. My greatest fear isn't euthanasia. None of those things are my greatest fear. My greatest fear is when people that agree with us listen to this podcast and turn it off and do nothing. That's my greatest fear. Because we've become accustomed to listening to these things, hearing these things, and then the podcast goes off and it's blank airwaves again. And we start listening to our favorite music and we never remember this conversation again, not because we don't, but because we don't want to. That's my greatest fear.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, a good prayer, a consistent prayer in your prayer life is, God, break my heart for, and then fill in the blank. I use this example all the time. I have a heart for homeless people. I don't want people to be homeless. I don't want them to be hungry. I don't want them to be cold. My heart doesn't break for them the same way it breaks for children who are being trafficked, and it should. And so, that to me, that's a prayer. God, break my heart for the homeless. That's what motivates me in what I do, is my heart being broken for this particular people group or whatever. And when my heart's broken, my passion ignites, because I want to do things that heal my broken heart. And to heal my broken heart, it's to go save this child. That's just me personally. I think there's a degree of prayer involved there. God, yes, I care about babies. I don't want babies aborted, but break my heart, God, to the point to where I'm passionate to go out here and do something.
So good.
One of the things that I will continually stay confused about and sad about, I think, is that we will get kickback off of this episode. I guarantee you I'll get some direct messages off this episode from the broader church that listens to us. Because earlier we were talking about unity, and how do you express unity in a place where there's disunity on how you approach these things, and I mean, just to kind of speak to what we've talked about in the last few minutes, is that's fear. There's fear rising up in me right now, even having this conversation, that I'm going to get kickback from people that listen to this. Because we do, I mean, particularly on Substack, we have a very wide range of theological perspectives. And so and I ask this to you guys out there that are listening to this right now, that are trying to craft your DM back to me. I want to hear you and I want to hear your perspective, but how can we love each other in the midst of our differences and that's the whole third place concept, or great good place I talked about earlier. How can we have a platform where I can share what I'm passionate about, you can share what you're passionate about, we can wrestle with these deep issues and still somehow love each other. That's what I think. The enemy wants to divide us, and he wants these topics to be divisive. But how can we overcome the strategy of the enemy to be divisive in the midst of these differences?
I'll share an experience with you that's it's more political related. I was having lunch with a friend of mine that's an attorney. Somehow the discussion got on politics, and I'm not a big I don't like discussing politics necessarily. He was sharing opinions with me that I knew were polar opposite from mine, and the way that I approached it was I would ask him questions when he would make a statement that I didn't agree with. I'm like, explain that to me. Help me understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that did a couple of things. One, I got to hear his thinking and his heart and where his belief originated from. It wasn't just a single statement. I got to hear from that. And then once I heard where his heart and where that belief originated from, that opened the door to more questions. And it just kept, and it became a very pleasant conversation. It didn't feel confrontational at all. I respected his opinion and his belief, and I truly wanted to understand where that was rooted within him. I didn't just, oh no, you're wrong. It's this, and I didn't just throw a Bible verse at him. I'm like, man, tell me where your heart is. Explain to me. Help me understand this, because I want to understand you, and I want to know you. And I think you can approach that with any topic, whether it's something faith based or politics or anything. I think we just tend to state our point of view, and then that's it. Then we just dismiss everything else about that person.
My son just yesterday found out he got a very large scholarship to a very liberal college. So this is real stuff for me right now. I'm wrestling with, like, I really wanted to celebrate with him because it was a huge opportunity. And at the same time, I thinking I got to get busy making sure he's ready to go, in 6 months to go and face what he's going to face at this very liberal. So that gave what you just said, or what we've said in the last few minutes, gives me a little bit different perspective about that. It's like, yeah, I'm scared for him to get exposed to some very good arguments that oppose what I believe or what I value. How can I help disciple and equip him to stand strong in what I hope that he would land on in his belief system. So,
well, that's a good point, because by affording them the opportunity to share the roots, if you will, of their belief or opinion, they're in turn going to afford me the same opportunity to now share the roots of where mine comes from.
Hopefully.
In this situation, it did. Obviously, not every conversation is going to end that way, but I think it's a way to open the door, especially by affording them that opportunity first. I think that would be reciprocated 9 times out of 10.
We've had an example of this even within the pro-life community in the state of Tennessee. Is there's another group that considers themselves pro-life, but has a very different way of going from point A to point B than we do to see abortion end in the state and across the country. We even had some folks from that group that came to our leadership conference, and at the leadership conference stood up and addressed exactly what they believed in. And said, this is what we believe in, this is what we stand on, and we disagree with the way the Tennessee Right to Life is doing it. I was able to have a civil conversation with them. I was able to explain our side. We did exchanged ideals back and forth, and have since that day, it was a couple months ago, we've had a lot of conversations since that day, and watched God create a friendship from this that's been unbelievable. They're now some of the people that are helping us on a day-to-day basis here at Tennessee Right to Life. Even though we may look at things and have a different way of getting from point A to point B, I love what you guys said, because if you do this with professionalism and you keep a positive approach to it and you don't attack people, you can see some really extremely awesome things happen.
Man, that's awesome. Well, guys, we're running out of time. So, Daniel, your biggest kind of goals, from what I understand, in the coming months, is to be able to find volunteers that are willing to lead chapters in every single county of Tennessee. Is that right, brother?
Absolutely. That's
correct. So tell us about that. How many current counties are represented?
We're at about 14, 15 chapters in the state of Tennessee right now that are active chapters. The beautiful part about all this is God is giving us a miracle across the state of Tennessee as we're onboarding right around 30 chapters.
Wow, that is
across the state
crazy.
of Tennessee.
And a lot of those kind of shut down during COVID.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So some are brand new that are coming up with new leadership. Some are leaders that have been involved for years and years. Some have 20, 25 plus years of experience in the pro-life movement. So God is doing some amazing things.
But a lot of counties to go.
That's right.
So if there's anyone listening to us, and it doesn't have to be Tennessee, there's a Right to Life across the country.
That's right.
So if there's anyone listening to us that wants to kind of put their hat in the ring and say yes to help in this pro-life, and this is not just abortion, it also includes euthanasia, the end of life, how would they get in touch with you? And then I'm sure you could direct them to the right place.
Yeah, you can find me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, all of those things. Daniel at tnrtl.org is my email address, and then tnrtl.org is our website address where you can go to. And there's a lot of updates happening there now, a lot of education materials being added, and a lot of resources for our chapters around the state.
That's so cool. And this would be super cool. If anyone has connections to the bus accident in Carrollton, Kentucky, that would be cool to reach out. That would be a huge blessing. So reach out to Daniel and say, yes, I had some connections to that, and thank your dad particularly. I'm looking forward to meeting your dad, actually.
He's looking forward to meeting you as well.
It'll be fun. So, all right, guys, anything else, Buckley? You want to wrap us up, or?
I am ready to go if you are.
All right, cool. Thank you, Daniel. I know that story is inspiring, but it also brings back a lot of memories. So thanks for sharing that with us. And all of you guys out there who feel like you're just ordinary people doing ordinary things, we want to inspire you and convince you that you're an ordinary person, but you can be doing extraordinary things. You can find us on Facebook on our Facebook group called the Kingdom Effect Podcast, or also on Substack. So yeah, thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time on the Kingdom Effect.